of digital transformation, what steps are involved in actually making this happen. Excuse me. And so that's the basic topic. So what can we do to make a digital transformation happen? What we've been talking about is, for the last couple days, is digital transformation. When somebody says digital transformation, what do they mean? Turns out the answer is a lot of different things. The short version of digital transformation is we come in and we do some number of things that kind of fit together. Most of the time, when somebody is talking digital transformation, one of the things they're talking about is doing some form of agile transformation. When people are talking about agile transformations, most of the time, again, they are talking about process agile as opposed to the other sides of agile. But occasionally they're also talking about the technical agile side of things. Some people, but not all people, when they're talking about agile, include DevOps in agile, or they are trying to talk about DevOps separately from agile. Either way works. And so people are doing agile. People are talking about DevOps. Those are components for the transformation. Folks are also talking about maybe if you're saying DevOps, we mean continuous integration and such. A lot of the time, other components of this include cloud transformation, doing more of our work in cloud environments. And occasionally, if you're talking about a digital transformation, you might include some other stuff in this, like some form of data processing, how we're doing our data management, machine learning kinds of things. Most of the time, that's treated as a separate effort, and the whole Agile and Agile Tech and DevOps and Cloud, that is what is meant by the digital transformation. There's a lot of pieces involved. Very few people have a good handle on what all of the pieces involved are. And so the question is, suppose we are trying to do this kind of digital transformation. What's involved? Well, something we might choose to do is go through a kind of structured program to do this kind of transformation. First thing you would want to do is you would want to get some sort of baseline awareness, right? I've been involved in a number of transformations. One of the baseline things we try to do with digital transformations is we go through and say, okay, we need a baseline level of education for an organization. And so we want to make sure that the organization gets information and essentially a foundational awareness. What that often means is simply a survey course. A lot of the time I try to say, okay, we're doing an initial pass to see how much of the organization we can get 4 hours or sometimes even 2 hours of outline into folks' heads on here's what we might be thinking about. Let's get much of the organization aware of what we're talking about. Okay, step 1, get an awareness. Step 2 in this process is, okay, I got a bunch of people who want to do something in the direction of digital transformation. What can I do further in the direction? The next step is usually some form of training. Folks want to learn something about digital transformation. An awful lot of the time, we can do deeper discussions of any one of the topics. Agile, there are Agile certifications that go for 2 days, but those are baseline Agile certifications. There's deeper stuff that can go for 3 or 4 or 5 days to do a more serious, deeper dive into interesting Agile areas. Beyond that, there's Agile technical trainings. I've done Agile technical trainings that are, hey, here's an hour on some basics about what is test-driven development. I've done a 5-day class on here's an intro to test-driven development all the way through to a serious work on quality refactoring. Survey classes that cover large chunks of Agile engineering and Agile quality that can be done in a week or so, right? There's huge amounts of information that we could do. Essentially, the point being, there's a deeper dive, a substantially deeper dive, probably any one topic, any one of these hour seminars that we've done over the course of the last week can turn into a week of material fairly easily. And once we have some training in place and people are going, okay, now I know what to do in general, there's the business of doing it, but there's also the business of doing it better. And fundamentally, you don't really get a picture of doing it better until you start doing it, but then you also want somebody in there with you helping and coaching. As a tech Agile guy, primarily, I do technical Agile transformations, which is to say, I do Agile transformations and I don't leave off the technical part. Most of the energy eventually has to go in the technical side. I have found that you get most of the benefit from the mentoring part, though peer mentoring is a very good approach, and strangely, the Agile technical practice of paired programming gives you peer mentoring. So having somebody from the outside come in and mentor is great. If you're doing an Agile technical team, what you really want is a couple, 3, 4 people to come into a team of 10, pair in, and get the team working. Getting the team working, it's pretty quick that that group can leave and be replaced with just team members and then move on to help a different group. But having the team members come in, pair in, and partner is a big deal. Okay, so if you were going to go ahead and build something that says, we are going to do agile transformation, we are going to do DevOps, we are going to do cloud, we are going to do technical agile, how could you do it? Well, to some extent, this is sales. WebAge can provide setting up a project that does this, building Sprint 0, getting a cloud set up, getting the Amazon Web Services set up, Azure, setting up the build and release processes, continuous integration, automation. Sorry, wrong button. Getting set up into the foundations of the DevOps approach, getting the process agile in place, getting TDD started, though it's generally a long process to be doing TDD as well as we can. Doing architecture in the teams as agile, doing some user experience, getting focused on modern user experience technologies, Angular or React. These days, focusing on customer-centric design, looking at how you set up risk for this kind of thing. In my experience, if you are going to do a digital transformation of some sort, having a serious pilot project is one of the best ways to show how you can do things and what can be done. Starting off with a pilot project is a great approach. Having a negotiation of what things we're going to bring into the pilot project is certainly worth doing, but setting up a pilot project is great, and getting support from the outside, getting an expert to come in and say, hey, yeah, we can do this. Let me help you get all of these pieces set up, or having a team of experts come in to do that, worthwhile. Okay, we've talked about technology enablement. We've talked about digital transformation. We've mentioned that organizational structure and culture are central to making sure this works. If a leader saying, let's do this, doesn't make a transformation happen. It's a consistent effort. It takes getting people on the ground interested. It takes getting through the resistance of people who don't really want to change. It takes getting through the calculated politics of management who says, hey, this change is going to come and go too. I'm not going to do anything yet. Getting teams to participate and do this is a big deal. The word matrixed is iffy in the Agile context. Agile folks like dedicated teams where this is what this team does, is it works on this one project and it doesn't get matrixed out and spread all over the place. From multiple managers, sure. Part-time, not as much. Using data as an asset. We didn't really talk about the data management side of things. Those are frequently a separate set of transformation types of topics. And user experience focus. Doing Agile, Tech Agile, DevOps, Cloud, and UX almost always ends up being the package of transformation. Figuring out how to integrate architecture into that model, figuring out how to do fancy data stuff with that model, those are interesting questions. The fancy data stuff, master data management, machine learning, those are interesting questions, but those can be left and often are left to a separate transformation effort. And so those aren't necessarily there, but Agile, Tech Agile, DevOps, Cloud, and UX are usually, those of us with a lot of experience tend to group those 5 together because any serious transformation needs to wrestle with all 5 of them, and they all impact one another. And so bringing in one will probably end up bringing in more than one of them. If we go through some sort of training program, the WebAge has training programs. We have a certification program, bunch of multiple choice tests, benchmarking, making sure that if your organization wants to go this way, WebAge can support getting folks to various levels of knowledge from basic, hey, we have an understanding of what's going on, all the way up through a more serious practitioner level. If we're going to do a digital transformation, you want something of an action plan. Here is a 30, 60, and 90 days what we want done. In the first 30 days, probably the first thing we want to do is get a handle on what's currently in place, have an understanding of where the organization actually is. First, where are we? Second, once we know where we are we going? Are we making changes on the cloud approach? Are we making changes on the agile process approach? Are we doing changes to the DevOps? How much of DevOps? How much of agile? Does this include technical agile? How's our architecture going to change? How's our customer centricity going to change? Okay, so there's a future state. We have a present state, we have a future state. Now, do I actually have a business need to go there yet? Yes? No. If so, if I have the business need, we probably need to lay it out, because for a transformation effort like this, it's not a cheap transformation effort. So we need to be able to fund it, and the business drivers are going to matter to this. If we can fund it, then do we have the right people to do this? Who can actually help with this? How are we going to measure it, right? What technological changes do we need to do? And what kind of modernization are we going to do? Organizational change management. After my first attempt at a digital agile transformation, which failed basically because it got kept running by, my first attempt at digital transformation failed. It was kept running by me having lots of energy to keep all of the pieces working together. As soon as I was called away from the project basically stopped running in an agile fashion because we didn't have the person in place pushing the agile thing forward. And so it reverted back to old approaches, and I looked at the situation and said, okay, what went wrong? Why weren't we able to actually make a change? So I went out and studied organizational change for a couple of years. Org change is a big deal. If you don't deal with the org change, your digital transformation is not going to work. I don't think that considering change management is sufficient. I'm firmly of the position that org change Folks from HR who studied org change need to be involved, and they need to be involved starting yesterday. You're going to do a big change, make sure your people are, the org change people are involved. At the very least, we need lots of messaging in place so that everybody's on the same page as to what's going on. Some amount of training is appropriate. Getting the big boss on board moving forward, so the big boss is actually leading rather than saying, yes, you can. Turns out in org change, permission and leadership are different things, and most transformations actually require leadership. For 60 days. What we need to do is a big chunk of the change effort is going to be getting stakeholders in place. Any transformation, any organizational change, there's people whose location in the company shifts. In the case of DevOps, build engineers, build management, deployment, governance, all of those people change dramatically what their role is. And so anything that you do involving DevOps, everybody inside of the release train is a stakeholder, because the DevOps transformation is going to change or maybe even eliminate their job. You have to be a participant there. If you're doing an agile transformation, the project manager role changes drastically. The business analyst role changes drastically. As we saw in a recent session, the architect role changes drastically. We need to figure out how to involve, if we're doing an agile transformation seriously, how to involve the architect, the project manager, the business analyst, whose roles have been turned upside down. Having a communication plan, having a regular messaging so that the organization is kept in a, here's the direction we're going, very important thing to do. Making sure we have funding to do what we want to do needs to happen early in the 60 days. Figuring out our goals and objectives, important. Figuring out who needs to learn what, how they're going to learn it. An educational roadmap is a big deal here. How are we going to measure success? Again, central to, if we're going to do this in an organization, organizations generally aren't willing to pay for stuff unless they can see stuff in motion. The modern world is not friendly to the, yeah, I'll show you results in 4 years. That world is not the world that I get to live in general. I need something substantially better than that, and metrics are a way of measuring forward progress so that the leadership can get there. Create leadership foundational awareness. That's a nice comment. I don't find that this is generally sufficient when doing a transformation effort. My experience suggests that we need, and the theory from organizational behavior says, you need substantially more than leadership awareness. You need leadership to say, yes, we're going to do this and I am going to lead it, or you're probably not going to get very far. So you need leadership buy-in is a minimum. You need leadership ownership of this as a success factor. And in 90 days, once you've got some leadership, yes, we're willing to do this, we need the leadership to get trained, right? Very important to make sure the leaders get training on a regular basis. Proof of concept teams for key areas need to be moving relatively quickly. We need a review of what we've done in the first 60 days. Hey, here's what we succeeded at. Here's what we missed. Here's what we could do next based on what we saw in the first 60 days. We need to start recognizing, recruiting, interacting with enthusiasts and resistors. Hey, if somebody's actively supporting this, let's bring them in and let them help. If somebody is resisting, some of the time the best thing to do is to bring them in and make sure we incorporate their concerns. Near in the last part of the first 90 days, we want to start planning for the next 90 days. And we need to have more aggressive messaging that's not just informational, but also promotional. Some of what we did in the first 90 days is going to be good. Some of it's going to be less good. We need retrospectives. We need moderately honest self-assessments. We need moderately honest other assessments, and we need to be prepared to change. If I said, hey, we're going to do an agile transformation, and the way we're going to do an agile transformation is we're going to end up basically just following a plan, some of you should rightly be upset. Agile's about adapting to the situation. What we need to be able to do is bring in folks who can handle adapting to the situation, revising, updating, changing minds based on what we learn. And with that process of evaluation, we go in and we set up a next 90 days. Probably we don't want to necessarily go too much beyond those 90 days. It is better to be having a direction we're going and a next 90 days of near-term visibility than to have a detailed longer-term plan that we are just going to have to rewrite when we determine that it doesn't actually fit all of our future needs. It's now 2 o'clock Eastern. Several of us have been through like 6 hours of training across the last couple days. What can I do to answer questions, support, help, provide additional information? Am I hearing that we're mostly done? Okay. I'm getting no questions for now. Oh. So can you expand on the question a little bit? The question is, how does Sprint, Verizon, T-Mobile, etc. how do they change the way they handle the network? I think you mean something by the question. I don't think I know what you're talking about in terms of changing how they handle the network. If you could expand on that, I could probably help to answer it. Oh, okay. So in general, that the question is, how do cell phone companies, change the way they work in terms of having the ability to integrate, having the ability to work to fix phones remotely, to do, so either I don't understand the question still, which is probably my fault, or I just haven't actually spent very much time with looking at the specific problems of mobile carriers, right? I've spent more of my energy. I've looked at government, I've looked at insurance, I've done work on retail. I haven't specifically gone in and looked at transformation efforts on the mobile platforms. And okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying. So communications companies do daily work to troubleshoot their cell sites and switches and stuff. What do they need to do in terms of a digital transformation? Again, without this being my specialty, there's got to be a massive motion towards automation. The general rule for modern technology is anything that is manually done is too expensive to do very much of. Anything that is done automatically, you can do frequently. Anything where you build it one way and it takes a lot of work to change it is problematic because things are going to have to change sooner or later, with a note that the modern world sees sooner more than later a lot of the time. And so what we end up with most of the time is, if the wireless organizations are not in the motion towards first building so that their updates and troubleshooting is mostly automated, then those companies that do more automation are going to end up in a better shape than those that do less of it. Second, building for a fixed answer. Right now we have a world in which people are fighting over whether we get to name something a new generation of cell practice. Everybody's mostly agreed that since cellular service got started, late 90s, since, we've seen 4 generations of cell networks, and people are talking about 5th generation stuff if disputing whether something's properly 5th generation. To automate stuff, you are going to have to put new devices into the network, but you're going to have to do a lot of automation. So Brando, I'm sorry, there's multiple meanings. So I think I answered your question, Joel. Lots of automation is the shortest answer. Brando, what's the future state of traditional production services? When we say traditional production services, we're talking about give me an example of a traditional production service. I hope we're still in software. I've been asked that question and people have started talking about manufacturing. So traditional production service is I have a component of my system that does person lookup by impartial, incomplete information, right? I've done that at a healthcare organization. Is that what we're talking about? Okay, thank you. That's a different thing. So that's great, wonderful. I appreciate it. I was going to answer the wrong question. So traditional production services. Release management. In the more aggressive, agile, or DevOps transformations that I've seen for release management. Release management turns into enforcement that folks are doing process correctly. And process, I mean something very different than historically. So traditional release management means I have requests to do a release. I have sign-offs, I have validation, I have right? I have all of this stuff set up where if I'm doing release management, my world is involved with requests, sign-offs, validation. The Agile DevOps world says short version is source code management, check-in, all the way to production should be a 10 minutes or less process. And so the historical approach where I make a request, I get a sign-off, I get validations, I do a check that all the components are in place, and that the source code is tagged appropriately in our SCM system, that's no longer a possible way of solving the problem. I need instead, this is a manual method of release management. An alternate method is I go look at a team's automated processes and I confirm that you have unit tests. I confirm that you have a coverage utility. I confirm that the build fails on under 80% coverage. I confirm that the integration tests have coverage. I can turn I confirm that the tools, when doing builds, are doing automated reporting. And so the motion in terms of release management, release management has more than this. Right? We're also concerned about conflicts, collisions, timing. If somebody is moving to a DevOps world, we are usually moving in the direction of small, isolatable components. And what we start seeing in terms of release management is instead of approving releases, release management approves release processes, approves sets of automation. They say, if you have this set of automation, then you can release on demand. And until you have this set of automation, I see that you're not doing static code analysis. You're not approved to do an automated release train. You have to do a manual release train. Right? That kind of thing is what you see in terms of the release management. Bug application feedback on bugs. So bug tracking services, is that what we're talking about? Stuff like Jira. People have been using Jira for bug management. Historically, feedbacks for bugs hasn't necessarily changed that much. We do try to keep bugs in the team. One of the big deal with bug handling bugs, not the software, but one of the big deals with handling bugs is the agile DevOps transformation. The word DevOps comes from saying, historically, we have a development team that does development and an operation team that handles bugs afterwards and which handles servers and such, and we don't want to separate those teams. We want one team that is responsible for the development and the operations, deployment and stuff of my application. And so entering bugs into Jira is a moderately standard thing to do. What changes is how bugs get prioritized, because bugs end up as work. And sometimes a new feature is higher priority and sometimes a bug is higher priority. But the general Agile direction is prioritization is overall prioritization, not separated prioritization between bugs and features. I don't know if I answered your question well, but a big chunk of bug management turns into bugs are additional things that somebody would like, and they need to be prioritized like everything else. Okay, you're welcome. I hope that meant it was part of what you wanted. Okay, some of you have stuck around for another 15 minutes after the end of the class. Anything else I can help you with, or shall we get on with our afternoons? Going once. Going twice. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. Have a nice afternoon. Have a nice weekend. And if you need training in the areas, let us know. Take care. Good afternoon.